Because we're poor, you assumed my mother was a thief? Annie asked, her voice breaking, tears running down her cheeks, but her eyes never leaving the richest man in the room. Richard Hartwell's face hardened, though his voice stayed calm. I am not making a conclusion, he said. I'm only questioning her. Questioning? Annie repeated, looking at the police officer standing beside her mother. Officer Daniel Reed held the cuffs low at his side. With handcuffs? Vivian Whitmore stood near the fireplace, one hand pressed against her bare ear. It's gone, she shouted. The earrings I left in the lounge are gone. She was the only one in that area. Marissa lifted her chin. I was cleaning, ma'am. That is what I was hired to do. Vivian pointed at her. Exactly. You were cleaning that room. Annie stepped closer to her mother. We have a duty to clean every part of this house. But that does not give you the right to accuse my mother of stealing. Richard's eyes moved from Annie to Marissa, then to Officer Reed. Young lady, he said, you should step aside. This is an adult matter. Annie almost laughed. An adult matter? She said. You were about to let a police officer take my mother away in front of an entire room of people, and I'm supposed to stand aside because I'm 18? Marissa spoke softly behind her. Annie, baby, don't. That had always been her mother's way. Even with a stranger's accusation wrapped around her throat, she was still trying to protect Annie. But Annie could not move. Richard exhaled through his nose. No one is saying your mother is guilty. Annie looked at him. You said people like her struggle with rent. Richard did not answer. You said stealing in your house would be a serious mistake, Annie continued. You didn't say that to Mrs. Whitmore. You didn't say it to any of the women who went in and out of that lounge. You said it to my mother. Vivian snapped. Because she had access. So did half the women at this party. Annie said. Did you ask them to open their bags? Did you check their cars? Did you ask if maybe Mrs. Whitmore took off her earrings and forgot where she put them? Vivian's mouth fell open. How dare you? How dare you? Annie shot back. You lost something, and the first person you looked at was the woman cleaning up after you. Annie turned to her. Did you see my mother take them? Vivian froze. I don't need to see it with my own eyes to know what happened. So you didn't see it, Annie said, her voice tightening. You only guessed. A few guests began to whisper. Some looked at Vivian with doubt. Others looked at Annie as if she had forgotten her place. Richard raised one hand, and the grand hall fell silent at once. Enough, he said. Mrs. Whitmore is my guest. Her jewelry disappeared in my home. This woman was the cleaning employee assigned to that area. The police will handle the rest. Marissa went pale. Sir, please check the cameras, she said. Please have someone search the room again. I didn't take anything. I only cleared a few empty glasses. I don't even look at guests' belongings. Richard looked her over from head to toe. His eyes stopped on her worn shoes, the frayed cuffs of her uniform, then returned to her tired face. If you didn't steal anything, he said, his voice low and cold, then you should have no problem going with the police to answer questions. My mother mops your floors, Annie said slowly. My mother clears wine glasses for your guests. My mother works until her back aches to earn every clean dollar she brings home. But you saw her uniform? And you decided she was a thief? Richard frowned. Be careful with your words. Were you careful with yours? Annie fired back. You just insulted my mother in front of this entire room. Officer Reed stepped forward. Miss, please step back. We only need to take her in for a statement. Annie turned sharply to him. For a statement? Or in handcuffs? The officer was silent for 1 second too long. Marissa quickly placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Annie, don't. I don't want you getting in trouble. Annie turned back, tears spilling down again. You didn't do anything wrong. I know, Marissa whispered. That's why we let them investigate. Vivian crossed her arms. I don't have all night to stand here and listen to a girl lecture us. I want my earrings back. Annie stared at her. You want your earrings? My mother wants her name. The room went still. Richard said, Miss Brooks, I understand you're upset. You don't understand anything yet, Annie said. That is the problem. Officer Reed lifted the cuff slightly. Mr. Hartwell, do you want me to proceed? Richard hesitated. Richard, Vivian said, this is your home. Annie stepped closer to him. And that is my mother. Before Richard could answer, a small voice came from the staircase. Daddy? Everyone turned. A little girl stood halfway down the stairs in pink pajamas. one hand on the railing, the other holding a stuffed bear by one ear. Her hair was loose from sleep, and her eyes moved from face to face until they stopped on Marissa. Richard's expression changed the moment he saw his daughter. "Lily," he said, his voice softer but strained, "go back upstairs." She looked at the police officer, then at the handcuffs, then at Marissa's face. "Why is everyone yelling at the cleaning lady?" she asked. No one answered her. Vivian gave a sharp sigh. "Richard, please. This is not appropriate." Richard turned toward the stairs. "Go upstairs, sweetheart. Something is happening down here." Lily stayed where she was. "Is it about the earrings?" she asked. Richard went still for half a second. "This is not your concern. Don't make me say it again. But I saw this lady drop the sparkly earrings," Lily said, pointing at Vivian. "When she opened her purse to get her lipstick, she pushed them behind the big wooden box on the table. I was going to pick them up and give them to her, but then she suddenly yelled and ran out." Vivian turned toward her slowly. "What did you say?" Lily pointed toward the east hallway. "They're in the blue room, behind the big wooden box. I saw them when I went looking for Mr. Buttons." Richard stared at his daughter. "Lily, are you sure?" She nodded. "I didn't touch them because I thought they were somebody's. They were shiny, and one was kind of stuck behind the box. I was going to tell Mrs. Keller, but she told me to go upstairs." Vivian's face tightened. "She's 8 years old. Children imagine things." Annie looked at her. "Funny how you believed your imagination just fine when it pointed at my mother." Marissa put a hand on Annie's arm. "Baby." Richard looked toward Officer Reed. "Lower the cuffs." The officer did. "Let's go to the blue room," Richard said. Vivian stepped forward. "Richard, this is humiliating. I told you where I left them." Vivian took another step. "I don't want my private belongings searched by a crowd of people." Annie looked at her. "But you wanted my mother taken away in front of everyone?" Vivian snapped her head toward her. "You should learn to be quiet when adults are speaking." Annie was about to answer, but Marissa placed a hand on her shoulder. Her mother's hand was ice cold. "Annie," she said softly, "enough." "It's not enough, Mama." Annie did not turn around. "Not while they still haven't apologized to you." Vivian heard that. Her face tightened with anger. "This is ridiculous. I'm the one whose property went missing, and now everyone is looking at me like I did something wrong." Annie answered immediately. "You did something wrong when you accused my mother without proof. I had the right to be suspicious." "Yes," Annie said, "but you didn't have the right to destroy someone else's name just because she looked poorer than you." Marissa tightened her hand on Annie's shoulder. "Babe." Richard looked at Vivian now with less certainty than before. "We are going to check the room." The walk down the east hallway felt longer than it should have. The blue room sat at the end of the hall. A small sitting room with pale walls, a wide mirror, soft chairs, and a vanity covered with the leftovers of the evening. Tissues, lipstick, perfume bottles, a half-empty glass of white wine, and a large wooden box near the corner. Lily stood beside Richard and pointed. "There." Richard stepped forward. He reached for the wooden box, paused, then moved it aside. The diamond earrings lay behind it. One turned on its side, the other caught in the fold of a white hand towel. Marissa closed her eyes. Vivian's hand went to her mouth. "Oh." That was all she said. "Oh." Annie looked at her. "That's it?" Vivian blinked. "I didn't know they were there." "But you knew my mother took them?" Vivian's cheeks colored. "I was upset." Marissa finally turned to her. "No, ma'am," she said. "A misunderstanding is when you call a person by the wrong name. You called me a thief without using the word." Vivian said nothing. Marissa looked at Richard next. "And you believed her because believing her was easier than seeing me. If Lily's words touched your heart, please like this video. Comment where you are watching from, because someone near you might be watching this story too. And do not forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this." Lily stepped closer to her father and slipped her small hand into his. She looked up at him, not accusing, just confused in the way children are when adults disappoint them without warning. "Daddy," she said softly, "you saw her uniform first." Richard looked down at his daughter. Then he looked at Marissa's name tag, Marissa Brooks. Richard stood with Lily's hand in his and looked at the name tag as though the letters had changed shape in front of him. Marissa Brooks. Not the cleaning lady. Not this woman. Not the answer to an accusation someone had been too comfortable making. Vivian reached toward the vanity. Well, now that my earrings have been found, I'd like them back. Richard did not move. The earrings were still behind the wooden box, one diamond catching the light every time someone shifted. A few minutes earlier, that same shine had been important enough to nearly ruin a woman's life. Now that the truth was turning in another direction, Vivian seemed eager to make the jewelry small again. Annie noticed that too. "You don't get to pick them up and pretend this is over," she said. Vivian's head snapped toward her. "I beg your pardon? My mother was almost taken away by police. You stood there and let it happen. Mr. Hartwell stood there and let it happen. Everybody in that room stood there and watched. So no, you don't get to put those earrings back on and go home like nothing happened." Marissa's hand found Annie's wrist, not to stop her this time, only to steady her. Annie could feel how cold her mother's fingers were. Officer Reed shifted beside the doorway. His hand was no longer near the cuffs, but Annie could still see them on his belt. That was the trouble with certain things. Once seen, they did not disappear just because someone changed their mind. Richard took a handkerchief from his jacket pocket and picked up the earrings carefully. He placed them on the vanity, in plain sight, but did not hand them to Vivian. "Security room," he said. Vivian stiffened. "Richard, surely that isn't necessary." "It is. They were misplaced." Richard looked at her, and Mrs. Brooks was accused. Vivian opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time that night, she seemed to understand that the room had changed its center. A few guests who had followed them into the blue room were watching her now, not Marissa. The house manager, Mr. Keller, hovered near the door with a tablet pressed to his chest. Richard turned to him. "There are cameras in this room?" "Yes, sir. One in the sitting room and one in the hallway." "And no one checked them?" Mr. Keller swallowed. "Mrs. Whitmore was certain, and with the police already here, I thought—" "You thought wrong," Richard said. The words were quiet, but they landed hard. Mr. Keller lowered his eyes. They moved through the back corridor toward the security office. Annie noticed the difference in the hallway immediately. The front of the house smelled like roses, perfume, and polished wood. This corridor smelled like floor cleaner, warm wiring, and the dinner trays waiting to be cleared. Guests walked through one world, workers moved through another. Same house, different map. Marissa walked beside Annie without speaking. Her shoulders stayed straight, but Annie knew the shape of that silence. Her mother was holding herself together one breath at a time. Annie wanted to say something, anything, but there was no sentence that could undo what had happened. Lily stayed close to Richard, her little hand still in his. Twice, she looked back at Marissa, as if she wanted to apologize, but did not know whether children were allowed to apologize for adults. The security office was small, too small for the number of people trying to fit inside. 6 monitors glowed over a desk crowded with coffee cups, a radio, and a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in foil. The guard on duty sat up so fast his chair nearly hit the wall. Richard did not waste time. "Pull up the blue room. Start 10 minutes before Mrs. Whitmore reported the earrings missing." "Yes, sir." The guard typed quickly. Timestamps appeared on the screen. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Vivian entered the blue room first. She was still wearing both earrings. She stood at the vanity, phone pressed between her shoulder and ear, speaking with the impatient movements of someone used to being answered quickly. She removed one earring, then the other, and set them near the wooden box. She opened her purse, dug inside, and pulled out a lipstick. Her elbow nudged the earrings. One slid behind the box. The other caught in the fold of a white towel and disappeared from view. Vivian left without looking back. No one said anything. The guard fast-forwarded. Minutes later, Marissa entered with a small trash bag and folded cloths over one arm. She moved the way she always worked. Efficient, careful, invisible on purpose. She collected empty glasses, wiped the side table, replaced a trash liner, straightened a chair, and never went near the vanity. She did not touch the wooden box. She did not touch the towel. She did not touch the earrings. Annie heard someone behind her whisper, "My God." The guard kept playing. Lily came in barefoot, searching under a chair, then behind a curtain. She spotted the shine behind the box and leaned closer. Before she could do anything, Mrs. Keller appeared at the doorway and motioned her out. Lily left. The footage ended. The room sat in the kind of silence that had no place to hide. The camera had done what the adults had refused to do. It had looked. Richard's face was still, but not in the way it had been earlier. Before, his stillness had belonged to control. Now it looked like something inside him had been forced to stand trial. Officer Reed cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brooks, you are not being detained. I apologize for the distress." Marissa turned her head toward him. "Distress?" The officer looked uncomfortable. Marissa's voice stayed level. "You were ready to put cuffs on me in a house where you had not checked a single camera." "I was responding to a complaint, ma'am." "You were responding to money," Annie said. "Annie," Marissa said softly. "No, Mama, he was." Mrs. Whitmore said something was stolen. Mr. Hartwell believed her. And suddenly your word weighed less than everybody else's. Officer Reed did not answer. Richard turned to Marissa. "Mrs. Brooks, I was wrong." Marissa looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," she said, "you were." He seemed to expect more. Maybe tears. Maybe gratitude for the correction. Maybe the kind of forgiveness people with power often expect once they stop doing harm. Marissa gave him none of that. Richard drew a slow breath. "I should have checked before allowing this to go so far." Annie looked at him. "Before allowing it?" His eyes moved to her. "You didn't just allow it," she said. "You let it." The word struck him cleanly. His jaw tightened, then loosened. He looked toward the screen, at the frozen image of Marissa doing her work. Head slightly lowered. Hands moving with care in a room where everyone had later decided carelessness belonged to her. Vivian folded her arms. This was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Marissa turned to her again. "No, ma'am. A misunderstanding is when you call a person by the wrong name. You called me a thief without using the word." Vivian's face hardened, but she said nothing. Marissa looked back at Richard. "And you believed her because believing her was easier than seeing me?" Lily leaned against her father's side. "Daddy," she said softly, "you saw her uniform first." Richard looked down at his daughter, then at Marissa's name tag again, as if those words had followed him into the room and would not leave. Marissa Brooks. Annie saw the moment he understood that reading a name after hurting someone was not the same as knowing it before. That was the first honest thing that had happened inside him all night, and even then, it was not enough. Vivian reached for the earrings lying in Richard's handkerchief. "May I have my property now?" Richard did not give them to her. He looked at Officer Reed. "Document the footage first." Vivian stared at him. "You cannot be serious." "I am. It was an accident." "No," Annie said, her voice quiet now. "Dropping them was an accident. Accusing my mother was a choice. No one corrected her. For the first time that night, no one dared." Richard's order changed the room more than an apology had. Officer Reed stepped closer to the monitor and asked the security guard to replay the footage from the beginning. This time, his voice had lost the easy authority it carried in the grand hall. He took out a small notepad, wrote down the timestamps, then asked Mr. Keller for a copy of the video. Vivian stood rigid near the desk. "This is excessive." Richard looked at her. "A woman was nearly taken from my home in handcuffs, because my earrings were missing. Because you accused her." Vivian's mouth tightened. She glanced around, searching for support. But the guests who had followed them into the cramped security office were no longer meeting her eyes. People who had been eager to watch Marissa be questioned now looked uncomfortable watching Vivian be challenged. Annie saw it and hated how late it came. Marissa stood beside her, quiet, shoulders held straight. Only her hands betrayed her. They trembled at her sides, so she folded them together, fingers interlocked until her knuckles paled. Annie wanted to take those hands and warm them between her own, but she knew her mother would not want that here. Not yet. Not while they were still surrounded by the people who had just measured her worth and found it disposable. Officer Reed turned from the monitor. "Mrs. Brooks, I'll state for the record that the footage shows you did not remove or handle the earrings." Marissa looked at him. "For the record?" "Yes, ma'am." "And where was the record when you had cuffs in your hand?" The officer lowered his eyes. "I should have waited." "You should have looked," Marissa said. No one spoke. Richard's jaw moved once, as if he had swallowed a response that would have protected him more than it helped her. Then he said, "She's right." The two words did not repair anything, but they stopped the room from sliding away from responsibility. Vivian gave a brittle laugh. "Fine, she didn't take them. I was mistaken. Is that what everyone needs to hear?" Annie turned to her. "No." Vivian stared. "No?" "No," Annie said. "That's what you say when you pick up the wrong coat from a closet." You didn't just make a mistake. You pointed at my mother and made the room believe she was a criminal. I never used that word. You didn't have to. Marissa touched Annie's arm again. This time the touch was gentle, almost tired. Let me. Baby. Annie stepped back. Marissa looked at Vivian, then at Richard, then at the few guests crowded near the doorway. Her voice was not loud, but it carried because the room had finally become quiet enough to hear her. I have cleaned houses for 22 years, she said. I have found cash under sofa cushions, jewelry in bathroom drawers, watches in laundry baskets, pills, passports, wedding rings, things people forget and things people hide. I have returned all of it, every time. Sometimes I got a thank you. Sometimes I got nothing. But I kept doing my work because my name mattered to me even when it did not matter to the people signing the check. Annie felt her throat tighten. Marissa continued. Tonight, you did not ask who I was. You asked what I had access to. You did not ask what kind of woman I was. You looked at my uniform and thought you already knew. Vivian shifted, but Marissa did not let her interrupt. I am poor, Marissa said. That part is true. I know exactly how much rent costs. I know what it feels like to stretch a grocery list until it almost breaks. I know how to make one tank of gas last longer than it should. But being poor has never made me a thief. The words settled over the room. Richard looked down. Annie watched him. The man who had seemed so large in the ballroom seemed smaller now, not weak, but stripped of the distance his wealth had given him. He could not hide behind the chandeliers in a room this small. He could not make the truth look like a misunderstanding under fluorescent lights. Lily slipped away from her father and moved toward Marissa. Richard reached slightly, then stopped himself. I'm sorry, Lily said. Marissa's face softened at once. Oh, honey, you told the truth. You don't owe me an apology. Lily looked at the floor. I should have said it faster. You're 8, Marissa said. The grown-ups should have asked faster. That sentence landed harder than anything else had. Richard closed his eyes for a moment. Vivian looked toward the door. I would like to leave. You'll wait, Richard said. She turned on him. Excuse me? You'll wait until Officer Reed finishes documenting the footage. Then you'll apologize to Mrs. Brooks. Vivian's face changed. Richard, don't be absurd. It isn't a request. The old authority returned to his voice, but now it was pointed in a direction Annie had not expected. Vivian heard it too. Her pride fought her fear of embarrassment and lost by an inch. She turned to Marissa. I'm sorry if you felt accused. Annie let out a breath through her nose. If? Marissa raised one hand slightly, stopping her. She looked at Vivian. That is not an apology. Vivian's cheeks flushed. I said I was sorry. No, Marissa said. You said you were sorry for how I felt. My feelings did not accuse me. You did. The room held still again. Vivian's eyes shone, not with remorse, but with anger at being cornered. I'm sorry I accused you. Marissa waited. Vivian's jaw tightened. Without proof. Marissa nodded once. Thank you. The words were polite, but Annie heard what they did not include. They did not include forgiveness. Richard turned to Officer Reed. When you complete your report, I want a copy sent to Mrs. Brooks. I also want confirmation that she was never detained. Officer Reed nodded. Yes, sir. Annie looked at him. Not just to Mr. Hartwell, to my mother directly. The officer met her eyes, then looked at Marissa. Yes, to Mrs. Brooks directly. For the first time that night, someone said her mother's name like it belonged in the room. Mr. Keller cleared his throat. Mrs. Brooks, I'm deeply sorry for the confusion. Marissa looked at him. Confusion did not grab my arm. His face went red. Richard turned sharply. Who grabbed her? Mr. Keller hesitated. Marissa answered. One of your staff. I don't know his name. He didn't give me the courtesy of his. Richard's expression darkened. Find out. The order sent Mr. Keller out of the room quickly. Annie watched him go and thought about all the times people learned names only after damage had been done. Her mother had worn a name tag all night. They could have read it at any time. They could have said it at any time. They had chosen not to. Vivian finally received her earrings after Officer Reed photographed them and logged where they had been found. She placed them in her purse instead of putting them back on. The empty space at her ears looked strange now, not like loss, but like exposure. The guests began to drift away, quiet and careful. Nobody laughed. Nobody touched Marissa. A few looked as though they wanted to say something, but shame kept them distant. Annie did not mind. She had no appetite for soft voices pretending to be kindness. Richard waited until the room thinned before speaking again. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "I owe you more than an apology in a security room." Marissa looked at him. "Yes, you do." He took that without flinching. "Will you allow me to make this right?" Annie almost answered for her, but Marissa spoke first. "You cannot make tonight right," she said. "You can only decide what kind of man you will be after being wrong." Richard stood still. Lily looked up at him, her small hand finding his again. Annie saw his fingers close around his daughter's hand, slowly this time, as if he needed something honest to hold. Marissa turned toward the door. "Come on, Annie, we're going home." They walked out through the service corridor, not the grand hall. Annie noticed that too. Even after the truth, the house still had a back way for people like them. At the exit, Marissa stopped beside the mop bucket she had left earlier. The water had spread and dried in uneven streaks across the floor. She stared at it for a moment, then bent to pick it up. Annie grabbed her hand. "Mama, leave it." Marissa looked at the bucket, then at the hallway behind them, where Richard Hartwell stood watching, silent. For once, Marissa did not clean up the mess. She straightened, took her daughter's hand, and walked out into the cold Atlanta night. The cold outside did not feel clean. It felt sharp. Annie and Marissa crossed the gravel drive without speaking. Behind them, Hartwell Estate glowed as if nothing had happened inside it. Every window warm, every column lit, every parked car polished under the lamps. From a distance, the house still looked beautiful. That made Annie angrier. A place could look graceful from the road and still hold ugliness in its rooms. Marissa walked with her purse tucked under one arm, her cleaning shoes making soft sounds against the stone. Annie kept expecting her mother to say something. She expected anger, a prayer, maybe one of those hard little lessons Marissa used when life disappointed her again. But Marissa said nothing. Their old Toyota Corolla sat near the service lot, between a catering van and a truck from the floral company. The windshield had fogged at the edges. Annie opened the passenger door, then stopped when she realized her mother had not moved. Marissa stood beside the driver's door, looking down at her hands. "Mama?" Marissa flexed her fingers once. The skin around her wrist was red where the officer had held her. Not bruised yet, but it would be by morning. Annie saw it and felt the rage return so fast it almost made her dizzy. "He touched you," Annie said. Marissa looked at the mark as if she had only now noticed it. "It'll fade. That's not the point." "I know." Annie waited. The night hummed around them. Somewhere beyond the hedges, traffic moved along the road. Ordinary people heading home from late shifts, grocery runs, church meetings, hospital visits. The world kept going. That felt unfair too. Marissa unlocked the car and sat behind the wheel. Annie got in beside her. For a while, neither of them closed the doors. The air inside smelled like lemon wipes, old coffee, and the peppermint candies Marissa kept in the console for long drives between jobs. Finally, Marissa pulled her door shut. Annie did the same. The sound was small, but it made the night feel final. Marissa put the key in the ignition, then stopped. Her hand stayed there, unmoving. "I am sorry," she said. Annie turned. "For what?" "For you seeing that." Annie stared at her. "Mama, no." Marissa looked straight ahead through the windshield. A child should not have to stand between her mother and handcuffs. "I'm not a child. You are mine." The answer broke something in Annie's chest. She looked out the window because if she looked at her mother, she would cry again, and she was tired of crying in places where people had already taken too much. "You didn't do anything wrong," Annie said. "I know. Then don't apologize." Marissa's mouth trembled once, but she held it still. "I am not apologizing for what they did. I am apologizing because I wanted better for you than this." The engine clicked when she turned the key. The Corolla shuddered awake. Marissa backed out slowly. Past the catering crew. Past two valets pretending not to look at them. Past the side entrance where workers came and went without touching the front steps. Annie watched the mansion shrink in the side mirror until the gates closed behind them. For the first mile, there was only the road. Then Annie said, "You should have let me say more." Marissa gave a tired breath. "You said plenty. Not enough. You think words fix men like that?" "No, but silence feeds them." Marissa glanced at her. Annie's hands were clenched in her lap. They were going to let him take you. All those people. They heard her. They heard him. They saw the cuffs. Nobody said a thing until Lily came down. People protect their comfort before they protect the truth, Marissa said. Especially when the truth might cost them dinner invitations. That's awful. It is old, Marissa said. That was worse somehow. They drove through neighborhoods that changed block by block. Manicured lawns gave way to gas stations with flickering signs, late-night chicken places, small churches with letterboards, barber shops closed behind metal grates. Atlanta had always been like that to Annie. Stitched together from wealth and work, memory and neglect. New glass towers rising not far from streets where grandmothers still swept their porches at sunrise. At a red light, Annie looked at her mother's hands on the wheel. Those hands had cleaned homes in Buckhead, offices downtown, rental houses near Decatur, and medical clinics where Marissa came after hours so no one would see who made the rooms ready for the next day. Those hands had packed school lunches, braided Annie's hair, sewn buttons on second-hand coats, counted cash at the kitchen table. Tonight, strangers had looked at those same hands and imagined theft. "Do you think he meant it?" Annie asked. "Who?" "Mr. Hartwell. When he said he owed you more than an apology." Marissa did not answer right away. "That man is used to making problems disappear," she said at last. "I don't know if he understands the difference between fixing a problem and facing it." Annie let that sit. "What about Mrs. Whitmore?" Marissa's eyes stayed on the road. She understood exactly what she did. She said sorry. "No," Marissa said. She surrendered a sentence because the room left her no place to stand. Annie almost smiled despite everything. Her mother could turn a phrase when she was angry. Quiet anger, church lady anger, the kind wrapped in grammar and steel. They reached their apartment complex a little after midnight. The building sat under yellow security lights, 3 stories of brick, with old railings and mailboxes that stuck if pulled too fast. A neighbor's TV flickered blue through closed blinds. Somewhere upstairs, a baby cried, then stopped. The place was tired, but it was theirs. Marissa parked in their usual spot near the laundry room. For a moment, she did not get out. Annie opened her mouth, then closed it. Marissa looked at her. "Say it." "I hate them." "No, you don't." "Yes, I do." "No," Marissa said quietly. "You hate what they did. Don't give people like that the power to turn your heart into a room they own." Annie swallowed. "How do you do that?" "I don't always." That honesty surprised her. Marissa leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, they were wet but steady. "Some nights I come home and I am so tired of being gracious, I could scream into a pillow until morning. Some nights I wonder why I raised you to be polite in a world that mistakes politeness for permission." Annie whispered, "Mama, but then I remember," Marissa continued. "I did not raise you to be polite so people could step on you. I raised you to know the difference between dignity and surrender. Tonight, you knew the difference." Annie looked down at her lap. Marissa reached over and touched her cheek. "I was proud of you." The words made Annie cry again, but this time the tears came quietly, with no room full of strangers to witness them. Inside the apartment, the kitchen light buzzed when Annie flipped it on. There were 2 plates in the sink from breakfast, a dish towel over the oven handle, and Marissa's work schedule pinned to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a peach. Home did not look like much, but no one here looked through them. Marissa took off her shoes by the door and winced. Annie noticed. "Sit down," she said. "Annie, sit down, Mama." Marissa gave her a look, then obeyed. Annie filled a bowl with warm water and found the Epsom salt under the sink. She had watched her mother do this for herself 100 times after long shifts. Tonight, she knelt and helped her soak her feet. Marissa looked embarrassed. "You don't need to do that." "Yes, I do." The room grew quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. After a while, Annie stood, grabbed her notebook from her backpack, and sat at the kitchen table. Marissa watched her. "What are you writing?" "Everything. Baby, it's late. I don't want them changing it tomorrow." Marissa's face changed. She understood. Annie opened to a blank page. Her hand shook at first, then steadied. Hartwell Estate. 11:43 p.m. Vivian Whitmore accused Marissa Brooks, without seeing her take anything. Richard Hartwell said, People like her struggle with rent. Officer Reed had handcuffs in his hand. Lily Hartwell saw the earrings behind the wooden box. Camera confirmed Mama never touched them. She paused, then added one more line. My mother did not steal a thing, but tonight they tried to take her name. Marissa read it from across the table. She did not tell Annie to stop. Outside, a car passed slowly through the parking lot. Somewhere in the building, pipes knocked behind the walls. Annie kept writing until the page was full, because truth, she was beginning to understand, needed witnesses. And when a room full of adults decided not to be witnesses, somebody had to write it down. By morning, Annie's hand ached from writing. She had filled 6 pages before the sun came up. Not because there was that much mystery left, but because every time she tried to stop, another detail returned to her. Vivian's hand pressed against her bare ear, Richard's voice when he said people like you, Officer Reed's fingers around the cuffs, the way her mother closed her eyes when the earrings were found, as if innocence had arrived too late to feel like relief. At 6:15, Marissa was already dressed for work. Annie found her in the kitchen, buttoning the same blue uniform she had worn the night before. It had been washed by hand and hung over the shower rod for a few hours, but the cuff was still frayed, and the collar still looked tired. Marissa pinned her name tag on straight. Marissa Brooks. Annie stared at it. You're going in? Marissa did not look up. Mrs. Alvarez needs her office cleaned before noon. You slept 2 hours. I've worked on less. That doesn't make it right. No, Marissa said. It makes it Tuesday. Annie stood by the table, notebook still open behind her. The kitchen smelled like instant coffee and toast. Outside, someone's truck coughed to life in the parking lot. It should have been an ordinary morning. That was the insult of it. How the world expects an ordinary from people who had been wounded the night before. You should call out, Annie said. Marissa poured coffee into a travel mug. And say what? That a rich woman misplaced earrings and a rich man insulted me. So now my rent can wait? Mr. Hartwell said he'd make it right. Marissa gave her a look. And you believed him? Annie hesitated. Marissa nodded as if that was answer enough. Powerful men say many things when their daughters are watching. The sentence stayed in the kitchen after she said it. Annie closed the notebook. Then, let me come with you. No. Mama. No, you have school. I can miss one day. You will not miss school because somebody else forgot how to treat us. Annie hated when her mother's pride sounded like a locked door. You're acting like nothing happened. Marissa stopped. Her hand rested on the counter. For a moment, Annie saw the weight of the night settle over her shoulders again. I am acting like everything happened, Marissa said. That is why I'm going to work. Annie did not understand. Marissa turned to face her. They wanted me to look ashamed. They wanted me to leave that house smaller than I entered it. If I hide in this apartment today, they get a piece of what they wanted. That's not hiding. That's resting. Marissa softened. I'll rest when I can afford to. The words were practical, not bitter. That made them hurt more. Before Annie could answer, Marissa's phone buzzed on the counter. She looked at the screen. The name made her face go still. Peachtree Premier Cleaning. Annie knew the company. They assigned most of Marissa's larger jobs, including Hartwell Estate. Marissa wiped her hand on a dish towel before answering. Good morning, this is Marissa. Annie watched her mother listen. Yes, ma'am, Marissa said. I understand there was an incident, but the cameras showed I didn't. She stopped. The kitchen seemed to shrink. No, ma'am. I was not arrested. No, ma'am. The police confirmed. Another pause. Marissa looked down at the floor. Her voice stayed polite because politeness had been trained into her by years of needing work from people who did not deserve it. I understand. Thank you for calling. She hung up. Annie already knew. They fired you? Suspended, Marissa said. Pending review. That means fired. It means pending review. Mama. Marissa picked up her travel mug, then set it down again. They said the Hartwell family has not filed a complaint against me, but several clients heard there was a police matter. They don't want to send me into private homes until things are clarified. Clarified? Annie's voice rose. It was clarified on camera. They said perception matters. Annie felt something hot and helpless climb her throat. Whose perception? The people who were wrong. Marissa did not answer. She moved to the sink and rinsed a spoon that was already clean. Annie grabbed her notebook. I'm calling Mr. Hartwell. No, you are not. He caused this. He contributed to it. He caused it, Annie said. He said those words in front of everybody. He let the officer pull out cuffs. Now your company thinks you're a risk. Marissa turned off the water. And what do you want to do? Beg him to fix our lives? No, make him face what he broke. Marissa looked at her daughter for a long time. There is a difference between asking for justice and handing somebody your dignity with a receipt attached. I'm not handing him anything. I'm making a record. Annie opened the notebook and wrote, 8:07 a.m. Peachtree Premier Cleaning suspended Mama because of perception, even after camera proved she did nothing. Marissa watched the pen move. You write like your grandmother, she said quietly. Annie looked up. Grandma wrote things down? Everything. Bills, recipes, birthdays, people who owed her money, people who owed her an apology. A faint smile crossed Marissa's face and vanished. She used to say paper remembers what people edit. Annie looked down at the page. She was right. At Hartwell Estate, Richard had not slept either. He stood in the blue room after sunrise, alone except for the housekeeper vacuuming the hall outside. The room had been restored. The glasses were gone. The towel had been replaced. The wooden box sat back on the vanity as if it had not hidden the truth a few hours before. That bothered him. He had spent most of his life believing order was proof that things were under control. That morning, the neat room looked dishonest. Lily appeared in the doorway in her school uniform, hair brushed but still slightly uneven where she had slept on it. She held Mr. Buttons against her chest. Daddy? Richard turned. Good morning. Are you still mad? He frowned. At you? No. At Mrs. Brooks? No. At the lady with the earrings? Richard looked at the wooden box. I'm not sure what I am. Lily walked in. Mrs. Brooks looked sad. Yes. Annie looked mad. She had reason to be. Lily touched the edge of the vanity. Did you say sorry? I did. Lily considered that with the hard seriousness of a child deciding whether an adult answer was good enough. Did she feel better? Richard had no answer. Lily nodded as if that proved something. Then maybe sorry wasn't finished. The words landed with irritating precision. Richard's phone rang before he could respond. It was Mr. Keller. Sir, the house manager said, voice tight. Peachtree Premier Cleaning has called. They've suspended Mrs. Brooks from assignments pending review. Richard closed his eyes. Lily looked up at him. What happened? Richard did not answer her right away. He looked around the blue room, at the restored furniture, the clean vanity, the absence of evidence. He thought of Marissa's name tag. He thought of Annie saying, you let it. Then he said to Mr. Keller, get me the owner of Peachtree Premier Cleaning. Not a manager. The owner. Yes, sir. And Keller? Yes, sir. Find the staff member who grabbed Mrs. Brooks's arm last night. A pause. Yes, sir. Richard ended the call. Lily was still watching him. Daddy, she said, are you fixing it? Richard looked at his daughter. I'm trying. She hugged Mr. Buttons tighter. Try where she can see. For the second time in less than 12 hours, Richard Hartwell found himself corrected by an 8-year-old. Across town, Annie was still at the kitchen table when Marissa finally sat down across from her. Not because she had given up, but because there was nowhere to go until the phone rang again. Annie pushed the notebook toward her. Marissa read the new line about Peachtree Premier. Her face did not change, but her fingers paused over the words. Paper remembers, Annie said. Marissa looked at her. And if they try to call this a misunderstanding, Annie continued, we'll have every piece written down. Marissa closed the notebook gently and placed her palm on top of it. Then write this too, she said. Annie picked up the pen. Marissa's voice was quiet, but steady. Being cleared is not the same as being restored. Annie wrote it exactly. Neither of them knew Richard Hartwell was already on the phone, learning how far a false accusation could travel before the truth had even put on its shoes. The call from Richard Hartwell came at 9:22. Marissa looked at the phone as if it had made a threat. Annie saw the number on the screen and straightened in her chair. Don't answer if you don't want to, Annie said. Marissa watched it ring once more. Then she picked it up. This is Marissa Brooks. Annie could hear only Richard's voice, as a low murmur through the speaker, formal and controlled. Her mother listened without blinking. Yes, Marissa said. They called me. Another pause. No, Mr. Hartwell. I do not need you to be angry on my behalf. I needed you to be careful last night. Annie looked down at the notebook. She wanted to write that down, but it felt too private while her mother was still speaking it. Marissa listened again. I understand what you're offering, she said, but I don't want my job back because a billionaire scared somebody over the phone. I want my name cleared because I did nothing wrong. Richard said something longer this time. Marissa's face changed slightly, not softened, not yet, but the hard line at her mouth loosened by a fraction. I'll consider it, she said. No, I'm not promising anything. You can send it in writing. She hung up. Annie leaned forward. What did he say? He spoke to the owner of Peachtree Premier. They're reinstating me. That's good. Marissa gave her a look. It is not good. It is late. But still, he also said he wants to send a written statement to everyone who was at that party. Staff, guests, security. He wants the video preserved. He asked if I would allow him to issue a formal correction. Annie sat back. That sounds like what we wanted. It sounds like what he should have done before I lost a morning of work and half my peace. Annie could not argue with that. Marissa rubbed her wrist where the red mark still showed. He asked if he could come by. Annie's eyebrows lifted. Here? I told him no. Good. Marissa looked at her. Annie hesitated. Or maybe not good. I don't know. Do you want him to? I want a lot of things, Marissa said. Most of them start with last night not happening. That ended the conversation for a while. Annie should have gone to school. Her backpack sat by the door, one strap twisted, her senior English papers still unfinished inside. But every ordinary thing seemed rude that morning. Algebra, attendance, cafeteria pizza, hallway gossip. Her mother's name had almost been broken in a mansion, and the world expected Annie to sit in third period like she did not still hear handcuffs. At 10:40, the phone rang again. This time Marissa did not answer. It was Peachtree Premier. A voicemail arrived. Marissa played it on speaker. Mrs. Brooks, this is Dana Whitcomb from Peachtree Premier. We want to apologize for the earlier call. After receiving clarification from Mr. Hartwell's office and reviewing the security notes, we are restoring your assignments effective immediately. We value your years of service and regret any confusion. Annie laughed once. Confusion. Marissa closed her eyes. They love that word. Can I write it down? You already are. Annie was. 10:43 a.m. Peachtree reinstated Mama after Mr. Hartwell called. They said, confusion. They did not say, we were wrong. Marissa stood and took her mug to the sink. That company has sent me into houses where people left cash on counters just to test me. They thought I didn't know. Annie looked up. What? Some people do that. A 20 on a dresser, a bracelet near the sink, a wallet half open, then they call it trust once you pass. That's sick. That's America, Marissa said, then turned off the faucet. Not all of it. Enough of it. Before Annie could answer, someone knocked. Both women went still. It was not a neighbor's knock. Neighbors tapped lightly or called through the door. This was measured. Careful. A knock from a man who had stood in boardrooms and did not know how hard to knock on a poor woman's door. Annie moved first and looked through the peephole. Richard Hartwell stood outside in a dark overcoat. No driver, no assistant, no house manager. He held a plain folder in one hand. Behind him, the cracked concrete walkway and peeling stair rail made him look misplaced. Annie turned back. It's him. Marissa's face went still again. I told him no. Annie looked through the peephole once more. Richard did not knock again. He just waited. That's the first smart thing he's done, Annie muttered. Marissa gave her a warning look, then walked to the door and opened it halfway. Mr. Hartwell. Richard looked at her, then at Annie behind her. His eyes went to Marissa's wrist and stopped there for 1 second. I know you said not to come, he said. I won't ask to come in. I only wanted to bring this myself. He held out the folder. Marissa did not take it yet. What is it? A written statement. It says the accusation against you was false, that the earrings were recovered in the blue room, that the security footage shows you never touched them, and that I acted without sufficient evidence. It also states that my words contributed to harm against your reputation. Annie watched him carefully. Does it say you were biased? Richard's eyes moved to her. Yes. That surprised her. He opened the folder and read from the page. My assumption was shaped by Mrs. Brooks's employment, her position in my home that evening, and my own failure to question why I accepted suspicion more readily when it was directed at a working-class black woman. The hallway was quiet. Marissa's hand tightened on the door. Richard lowered the page. I have sent it to Peachtree Premier. I will send it to every guest and vendor from last night. But I wanted you to see it first. Marissa looked at the folder. Why? Because I spoke about you in front of other people before I spoke to you like a person. The sentence sat between them. Annie hated that it was a good sentence. She hated more that he seemed to mean it. Marissa took the folder but did not invite him in. Thank you for bringing it. Richard nodded. Mrs. Brooks, I would also like to compensate you for the lost work and for what happened in my home. Marissa's face hardened. I am not for sale. I didn't mean. I know what you meant. I'm telling you where the line is. Richard accepted that. Then tell me how to approach it. Annie looked at her mother. Marissa seemed tired down to the bone, but her voice stayed clear. You don't approach it today, she said. Today you let me decide what I can stand to read. Today you go home and explain to your daughter why she had to be the one to tell the truth in a room full of adults. Richard looked down. Marissa began to close the door, then stopped. And Mr. Hartwell? Yes? If you send that letter, do not call it an unfortunate incident. Do not call it confusion. Do not call it a misunderstanding. Richard nodded slowly. What should I call it? Marissa looked him in the eye. What it was. She closed the door. For a moment, neither she nor Annie moved. Then Marissa handed the folder to her daughter and sat at the kitchen table as if her knees had finally remembered the night before. Annie opened the folder and read the first line. To Mrs. Marissa Brooks, and to every person who witnessed what happened in my home. She looked at her mother. Marissa whispered, Keep reading. Annie did, and for the first time since the earrings disappeared, the truth began moving faster than the lie. Annie read the letter twice. The first time, she read it as a daughter, with her hands tight around the pages and her eyes stopping on every sentence that named what had happened. The second time, she read it like a witness. She checked what Richard admitted and what he avoided. He admitted the accusation had been false. He admitted the earrings had been found in the blue room behind the wooden box. He admitted security footage showed Marissa Brooks had not touched them. He admitted he had allowed suspicion to move faster than evidence. He admitted his words about rent and people like her had been harmful, biased, and wrong. Annie stopped there and looked up. Marissa sat across from her with both hands around a mug she had not drunk from. He wrote biased, Annie said. I heard. He didn't soften it. No. Annie looked back at the letter. Do you believe him? Marissa was quiet for a while. Outside the kitchen window, a maintenance man pushed a cart past the laundry room. Somebody upstairs dropped something heavy, then cursed under their breath. The building kept living around them. I believe he knows he was wrong, Marissa said. That is not the same as knowing what to do with being wrong. Annie nodded slowly. That sounded like something her mother would say, and also like something she would need years to understand fully. At noon, the statement went out. Annie knew because her phone started buzzing first. A text came from Kayla, her best friend from school. Girl, what happened at some rich people house last night? Then another, my aunt works catering. She said a lady accused your mom. Then a third, are you okay? Annie stared at the screen, then turned it face down. Marissa noticed. People are talking? They were always going to. Then let them talk with the truth in their mouths. That line went into the notebook. 12:14 p.m. Mama said let them talk with the truth in their mouths. By 2 o'clock, Peachtree Premier had sent a second email. This one did not say confusion. It said Mrs. Brooks was wrongly implicated in a matter that has since been fully resolved by video evidence. It said her assignments would continue uninterrupted. It said the company valued her integrity and years of trusted service. Annie read it out loud and made a face. They valued your integrity after Mr. Hartwell put it in writing. Marissa took the phone and read the email herself. Still no apology. Do you want me to reply? No. I could make it sound professional. That is what worries me. Annie almost smiled. It was the first almost smile in the apartment all day. Then another message came in, this one from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a social media post. Someone who had been at the party had written, last night at Hartwell Estate, there was an unfortunate situation involving misplaced jewelry and a staff member. Glad it was resolved peacefully. Annie's face changed. Marissa saw it. What? Annie handed her the phone. Marissa read the post, then closed her eyes. There it is. What? The polishing. Annie stood so fast, the chair scraped. No, absolutely not. Annie, no, Mama. They are not going to turn what happened to you into misplaced jewelry and a staff member. Marissa did not stop her this time. Annie opened her notebook, took a picture of the page where she had written the time, the words, the cuffs, Lily, the camera. She did not post it. Not yet. Instead, she typed a comment under the woman's post with hands that shook only at the beginning. My mother has a name. Her name is Marissa Brooks. She was accused without proof, nearly taken away in handcuffs, and cleared by camera footage. That is not misplaced jewelry and a staff member. That is a false accusation against a working woman who deserved better. She read it to Marissa. Her mother looked tired, but her eyes stayed steady. Take out the last sentence. Why? Because she deserved better sounds like asking them to feel sorry. I do not want pity in my defense. Annie deleted it. Marissa thought for a moment. Right. She deserved the truth before suspicion. Annie changed it and posted. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. Kayla liked the comment. Then her aunt did. Then 2 catering workers added their own comments. One wrote, I was there. The daughter is telling the truth. Another wrote, the police had cuffs out before anyone checked cameras. The original poster deleted her post. Annie stared at the screen. She deleted it. Marissa sipped her cold coffee. Some people only like peace when it protects them. At Hartwell Estate, Richard saw the deleted post because Lily's nanny, Mrs. Keller, showed it to him with trembling hands. I thought you should know, sir, she said. Richard read Annie's comment twice. She deserved the truth before suspicion. He placed the phone on his desk and rubbed his forehead. Across from him, Mr. Keller stood stiffly, still waiting to report what Richard had asked for earlier. Did you find out who grabbed Mrs. Brooks's arm? Richard asked. Yes, sir. One of the temporary floor supervisors, Mark Ellison. He said he was trying to keep her from leaving before the police arrived. Had she tried to leave? No, sir. Richard looked up. Mr. Keller swallowed. She was standing beside the mop bucket. Richard leaned back in his chair. The office around him was paneled in dark wood, lined with awards, framed newspaper covers, photographs of ribbon cuttings and charity dinners. In one picture, Richard was shaking hands with the mayor. In another, he stood at a fundraiser for working families. He looked at that one for too long. Terminate Ellison from any Hartwell event list, he said, and send Mrs. Brooks a written account of that decision. Yes, sir. No vague language. Say why. Mr. Keller nodded. Yes, sir. After he left, Richard sat alone until Lily came in without knocking. She had changed out of her school uniform and still carried Mr. Buttons, though Richard suspected she was old enough not to need him and young enough to pretend she did. Are you working? She asked. I'm trying to. On Mrs. Brooks? Richard turned his chair toward her. Yes. Lily climbed onto the visitor chair, legs too short to reach the floor. Did she say thank you? No. Why? Because I have not done enough to be thanked. Lily seemed to accept that. Can I write her a note? Richard blinked. You want to? Yes. I want to tell her I'm sorry the grown-ups were slow. Richard looked at his daughter for a long moment. I think she would appreciate that. Lily frowned. Appreciate means like, but quieter? Despite himself, Richard breathed out a small laugh. Something like that. Lily nodded. Then I'll write it. That evening, Annie and Marissa were eating grilled cheese sandwiches at the kitchen table when another knock came. This one was lighter. Marissa opened the door to find a driver holding an envelope and a small folded note. No signature required, ma'am, he said. Mr. Hartwell asked that these be delivered directly to you. Marissa took them and closed the door. Inside the envelope was a second statement. Mark Ellison, temporary floor supervisor, had been removed from all Hartwell contracted events for physically restraining Marissa Brooks without cause or authority. Marissa read it once and set it down. The folded note was written in uneven pencil. Dear Mrs. Brooks, I am sorry the grown-ups did not look first. You have a pretty name. I should have said it. From Lily Hartwell. Marissa covered her mouth with one hand. Annie read the note over her shoulder and felt her anger shift, not disappear, but make room for something else. She's a good kid, Annie said. Marissa nodded. Yes, she is. Annie picked up her notebook and wrote Lily's sentence carefully. The grown-ups did not look first. Then beneath it, she added one of her own. That is how injustice starts. Not always with hate. Sometimes with people deciding they already know where to look. The next morning, Annie went back to school because Marissa stood in the kitchen doorway and made it clear that justice did not excuse truancy. "You have first period English," Marissa said, holding out Annie's backpack. "Mama, I barely slept." "Neither did I." "That's not an argument. It is when I'm still going to work." Annie took the backpack but did not put it on. "What if people ask?" "They will." "What do I say?" Marissa leaned against the doorframe. Her uniform was clean, her name tag straight, her shoes polished, as well as old shoes could be polished. The red mark on her wrist had faded but not disappeared. "You say the truth," she said. "Not more than you owe, not less than you need." Annie looked at her mother for a long moment. "Are you scared to go back?" Marissa smiled without humor. "Of course. Then why are you acting like you're not?" "I'm not acting. I'm choosing." That answer followed Annie all the way to school. By second period, everyone knew enough to know something. That was how stories traveled in high school. They arrived without facts, wearing confidence. Annie heard whispers at her locker, in the hall outside chemistry, near the vending machines. Some students looked at her with concern. Others looked at her like she had become part of a video they had not seen yet. Kayla found her before lunch and pulled her into the empty choir room. "Okay," Kayla said, closing the door. "Tell me what actually happened." Annie set her backpack on a chair. "My mother was working at Hartwell Estate. Some rich woman lost earrings. She blamed Mama. Hartwell called the cops. His daughter found the earrings where the woman dropped them." Kayla's mouth opened. "That's the short version?" "That is the clean version." Kayla sat down slowly. "Did they really have cuffs out?" Annie nodded. Kayla's face changed. She had known Annie since 6th grade. She had eaten Marissa's cornbread, borrowed Marissa's umbrella, fallen asleep on their couch during sophomore finals. To Kayla, Marissa was not a headline or a staff member. She was the woman who packed extra sandwiches because teenage girls lie about not being hungry. "I'm sorry," Kayla said. Annie looked away. "I hate that sentence today." "I know. I don't have a better one." That made Annie breathe out. Not quite a laugh. Close. At lunch, Annie checked her phone and saw that Richard's statement had been forwarded, screenshotted, discussed, praised, criticized, and repackaged by people who had not been there. Some comments called him brave for admitting bias. That made Annie so angry she had to put the phone down. Brave. Her mother had stood in a room with handcuffs waiting. Richard had written a letter after being proven wrong. People loved a powerful man's apology more than a poor woman's innocence. Annie wrote that down in the margin of her notebook and underlined it twice. Across town, Marissa returned to work at an office building off Peachtree Street, not Hartwell Estate, not yet. A small accounting firm with beige walls, glass partitions, and employees who left coffee rings on desks. She clocked in at 5:03 p.m. The woman at the front desk smiled too brightly. "Marissa, good to see you." Marissa nodded. "Good evening, Miss Janet." There it was, that tightness in the woman's face, the knowledge, the desire to be kind without knowing how. Marissa had seen it before after deaths, layoffs, evictions, hospital scares. People approached the wounded like they were holding a glass too full. "If you need anything tonight," Janet began. "I need the supply closet key." Janet blinked, then handed it over. "Of course." Marissa cleaned the conference room first. She wiped the table in long, even strokes, emptied trash bins, replaced liners, cleaned fingerprints from the glass door. Work steadied her. It always had. The rag in her hand, the checklist on the cart, the order of tasks. There was mercy in a thing that made sense. In the third office, she found a $20 bill on the floor beneath a rolling chair. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she picked it up, walked back to the front desk, and placed it in front of Janet. This was under Mr. Lowell's chair. Janet's face flushed. "Oh, thank you." Marissa waited. Janet looked confused. "I'll make sure he gets it." Marissa nodded and went back to work. She did not know why that small moment hurt more than expected. Maybe because she had returned money all her life, and still one accusation had been enough to make people wonder. A reputation could take 20 years to build and 10 seconds to threaten. That was the math working people lived with. At Hartwell Estate, Richard sat at his desk with 3 printed pages in front of him. His legal counsel had revised the statement he wanted to send to all guests. The new version was safer, cleaner, less direct. He read the first line again. An unfortunate incident occurred during last evening's private gathering. He took a pen and crossed it out. Lily sat on the rug near the fireplace, drawing with colored pencils. She had been allowed to stay in his office after dinner because, as she put it, "You make better choices when I'm here." Richard had not argued. "What does unfortunate mean?" she asked without looking up. "It means something bad happened." "Then why not say bad?" Richard looked at the crossed-out sentence. "Because adults like words that make bad things sound less bad." Lily considered that. "That's sneaky." "Yes," Richard said. "It can be." He pulled a fresh sheet toward him and wrote by hand. "Last night, in my home, Mrs. Marissa Brooks was falsely accused of stealing jewelry. The accusation was made without evidence. I accepted it too quickly. I allowed police involvement before the room had been searched and before security footage had been reviewed. That was wrong." He paused, then added the line he had been avoiding because it left him nowhere to hide. "My judgment was influenced by bias." His pen stopped. Lily looked up. "Is bias when you think something before you know something?" Richard stared at her. "Yes," he said. "That is a very good definition. Did you have it?" "Yes." "With Mrs. Brooks?" "Yes." Lily went back to coloring. "Then write that." So he did. Later that evening, Annie and Marissa met at the bus stop because the Corolla had started making a grinding sound and Marissa refused to push it another day without a mechanic looking at it. They sat together on the bench under the flickering shelter light. Marissa smelled faintly of disinfectant and cold air. Annie smelled like school hallway and cheap cafeteria fries. "How was it?" Annie asked. "Work?" Annie nodded. "Quiet. That means bad. That means quiet." Annie gave her a look. Marissa sighed. "People were careful with me. Isn't that good?" "Not always. Sometimes careful is just another way of keeping distance." The bus rolled up before Annie could answer. They climbed on, paid, and took 2 seats near the middle. An older man in a falcon's cap nodded at Marissa. She nodded back. A woman with grocery bags shifted one bag so Annie could sit easier. Ordinary kindness, small and unannounced. Annie felt herself loosen a little. Halfway home, Marissa's phone buzzed. She opened the email. Annie leaned close. The subject line read, "Formal statement regarding Mrs. Marissa Brooks." Marissa read silently. Annie watched her face. Once, her mother's lips pressed together. Once, her eyes closed. At the end, she handed the phone to Annie. This version was not polished. It said false accusation. It said without evidence. It said bias. It said Mrs. Marissa Brooks by name every time. It said the video would remain preserved and available to her. It said every vendor and guest would receive the statement. It said Hartwell Estate would change its policy before hosting another event. Annie read the last line twice. Mrs. Brooks was owed the truth before suspicion, and she did not receive it in my home. Annie looked at her mother. Marissa stared out the bus window at the passing lights. "He used your words." "No," Annie said. "He used yours too." Marissa did not answer. At home, Annie printed the statement at the library kiosk in the apartment office because their printer had been out of ink since October. She placed it beside her notebook on the kitchen table. Marissa changed out of her uniform and came back in house slippers. For a while, they just looked at the pages. "Does it help?" Annie asked. Marissa touched the corner of the printed statement. "It helps the world know," she said. "That's not the same as helping my body forget." Annie nodded. She understood. The mind could receive correction faster than the heart could release injury. Marissa went to bed early, though Annie heard her moving around for another hour. Opening drawers, closing them, checking the front door twice, the small habits of a woman trying to feel safe in her own life again. Annie stayed at the kitchen table and opened her notebook. She wrote the title at the top of a new page, what they call it when they want to move on. Under it, she listed the words she had heard in the last 24 hours. Confusion, incident, misunderstanding, misplaced, resolved, distress. Then she wrote what it had actually been: a false accusation, a public humiliation, a bias, a near arrest, an injustice. She sat with that word for a long time. Injustice. It looked heavy on the page, but not too heavy to carry. Not if she kept writing, not if her mother kept standing, not if, somewhere across the city, a little girl with a stuffed bear was teaching a billionaire how to say the thing plainly. Annie closed the notebook only after she added one final sentence. Justice does not begin when powerful people feel sorry. It begins when they stop choosing softer words for the harm they caused. By Friday morning, Richard's statement had reached more people than Annie expected. It moved through email inboxes, staff group chats, vendor lists, church circles, and neighborhood conversations. It reached a woman who had worked coat check at Hartwell Estate. It reached a bartender who had watched the officer take out the cuffs. It reached 2 caterers who admitted they had seen Marissa standing alone afterward but had been too afraid of losing work to speak. It even reached Mrs. Alvarez, one of Marissa's regular clients, who called before breakfast and said, "Marissa, I saw the letter. I am sorry that happened to you." Marissa thanked her. Then she hung up and sat at the kitchen table without touching her toast. Annie watched her. That sounded like a real apology. It was close. Close? Marissa picked up the toast, then set it down again. A real apology does not sound surprised that you are innocent. Annie wrote that down before her mother could tell her not to. Marissa noticed and sighed. "You're going to fill that whole notebook. I have 2 more. That worries me. It should worry them." For the first time in days, Marissa smiled a little. It did not last long, but Annie saw it and held on to it. The smile disappeared when another message came in. This one was from Peachtree Premier Cleaning, asking Marissa to stop by the office before her next assignment to review next steps. Annie read the text over her shoulder and felt her jaw tighten. "Next steps?" she said. "They already reinstated you. They want me to sign something." "How do you know?" "Because people with offices love paper when paper protects them." Annie stood. "I'm coming." "No. Mama. No. You have school. It's Saturday tomorrow. I can miss one Friday afternoon." Marissa looked at her. "You are not missing school to watch grown people disappoint you in fluorescent lighting. That is very specific. I've had experience." Annie did go to school, but she did not stay long in spirit. All morning, her mind sat in Peachtree's office beside her mother. In history class, while Mr. Rollins talked about reconstruction and broken promises, Annie copied dates from the board and thought about how every generation had its own vocabulary for the same old insult. Back then, people called it order. Last night, they called it suspicion. This week, they called it confusion. At lunch, Kayla slid into the seat across from her. "You look like you're about to fight a vending machine. My mom has to go to Peachtree after school. Want me to come?" Annie looked up. "You'd do that?" Kayla opened her bag of chips. "Your mom once drove me home in a thunderstorm and gave me socks because my shoes were wet. I owe her at least one corporate hallway." Annie laughed despite herself. After school, Kayla came with her to Peachtree Premier's office, a low brick building near a strip mall with a dentist, a tax preparer, and a place that sold uniforms for nurses and security guards. Marissa was already there, sitting in the waiting area with her purse on her lap and her work shoes planted squarely on the floor. She looked at Kayla. "You too?" Kayla sat down beside Annie. "Moral support, Miss Brooks." Marissa shook her head, but her eyes softened. "Lord, give me patience with teenagers." Dana Whitcomb, the regional manager, came out 5 minutes later. She was a white woman in her 50s with a smooth bob haircut and a smile that had been trained to survive complaints. She looked surprised to see Annie and Kayla. "Mrs. Brooks, we only need you." "My daughter stays," Marissa said. Dana's smile held, but just barely. "This is an internal employment matter. It became a family matter when your company suspended my mother after she was cleared on camera," Annie said. Marissa gave her a look. Annie folded her hands in her lap and said nothing more. Dana led them into a small conference room with a fake plant in the corner and a framed sign that read, "Excellence through Trust." Annie looked at the sign, then opened her notebook. Dana noticed. "Is that necessary?" "Yes," Annie said. Marissa almost smiled again. Dana placed a document on the table. "Mrs. Brooks, first, we want to say we deeply regret the distress caused by the temporary pause in your assignments." "Temporary pause," Annie repeated under her breath. Marissa touched her knee under the table. Dana continued, "We value you. You've been with us for 11 years. However, given the public nature of the incident, we need to make sure everyone is protected moving forward." "Protected from what?" Marissa asked. Dana folded her hands. "From misunderstanding." Annie's pain stopped. Marissa leaned back slightly. "Miss Whitcomb, I need you to listen carefully. I will not sign anything that says I was involved in a misunderstanding. I was falsely accused. There is a difference." Dana's smile thinned. The language is standard. So was the way you suspended me, Marissa said. That did not make it right. Dana glanced at Annie's notebook, then back to Marissa. The form simply states that Peachtree Premier is restoring your assignments, and that all parties agree not to pursue further claims related to the incident. Annie looked up. So it's a release. Dana's eyes shifted to her. It's a standard acknowledgement. It says she gives up claims. Annie, Marissa said softly. No, Mama, that's what it says. Dana stiffened. Are you an attorney? No, I can read. Kayla coughed into her hand. Marissa picked up the document and read it slowly. Annie watched her mother's face grow calmer, which meant angrier. When she finished, she placed the paper back on the table. I won't sign this. Dana's tone cooled. Mrs. Brooks, refusing to complete paperwork may complicate your reinstatement. My reinstatement was not a favor, Marissa said. It was a correction. Dana was quiet. Annie wrote that down. Marissa stood. You can send any future paperwork to me by mail. I'll have someone review it. Dana stood too. Mrs. Brooks, I would hate for this to affect your assignments. Marissa looked at her. You already let it affect my assignments. The room went still. Then Marissa picked up her purse. Come on, girls. They walked out without another word. In the parking lot, Kayla let out a breath. Miss Brooks, respectfully. That was terrifying. Marissa unlocked the Corolla. Good. Annie looked at her mother across the roof of the car. Who's going to review the paperwork? Marissa sighed. I was hoping you wouldn't ask that until we got home. At that moment, a black sedan pulled into the lot. Richard Hartwell stepped out, not with the confidence of a man arriving to take over, but with the caution of someone entering a place where he had not been invited. Annie's whole body tensed. Did you call him? Marissa frowned. No. Richard approached slowly. Mrs. Brooks. Marissa held her ground. Mr. Hartwell. He looked from her to Annie, then toward the Peachtree office. I received a copy of the document they asked you to sign. My office was copied by mistake. Annie's eyes narrowed. Convenient mistake. Richard accepted the jab. Possibly. I came because that document is improper. Marissa's face did not change. I know. That stopped him for half a second. Then he nodded. Good. I don't need you to rescue me from a paper, Marissa said. No, Richard replied, but you may need a lawyer who doesn't work for Peachtree or me. I can give you the names of 3 legal aid groups that handle employment matters. No Hartwell money. No obligation. Annie studied him. That was the first offer he had made that did not sound like it placed him in the center. Marissa seemed to notice too. You know legal aid groups? She asked. I fund 2 of them, Richard said, then paused. But they have sued companies I own, so they are not sentimental about me. Kayla whispered. That's actually kind of funny. Annie elbowed her lightly. Marissa took the card Richard offered, but she did not thank him right away. Richard looked toward the Peachtree building. Mrs. Brooks, I am beginning to understand that what happened in my house did not end in my house. No, Marissa said. It followed me home, then to work, then into this parking lot. Richard nodded. Then I'll stop pretending one letter was enough. Annie opened her notebook and wrote that line before she could decide whether she trusted it. Marissa looked at the card in her hand, then at Richard. You still have a lot to learn. I know. No, she said. You know that you should say you know. That is not the same thing. Richard took that too. Annie watched him closely. In the mansion, his pride had filled every room. Here, in a strip mall parking lot between a tax office and a uniform store, he looked less certain. Not weak, just less protected from ordinary truth. Marissa got into the car. Annie and Kayla followed. Before closing the door, Annie looked back at Richard. If you really want to learn something, stop asking what you can do for her, and start asking what your world keeps doing to people like her. Richard did not answer quickly. Then he said, That is fair. Annie closed the door. As Marissa pulled out of the lot, Annie looked through the rear window. Richard was still standing there with the Peachtree building behind him and the legal aid card no longer in his hand. Kayla leaned close and whispered, Your life got very dramatic this week. Annie looked at her notebook, at the lines filling page after page, and thought about her mother sitting in that conference room, refusing to sign away her dignity in exchange for work she had already earned. No, Annie said. It was always dramatic. People just started noticing. The legal aid card stayed on the kitchen table all weekend. Marissa did not touch it at first. She worked Saturday morning at Mrs. Alvarez's office, came home with tired feet, cooked spaghetti with jarred sauce because Annie had always liked it better than she admitted, and folded laundry while the evening news talked about traffic, weather, and a city council argument over parking meters. Ordinary things returned, but not smoothly. They came back like furniture moved into place after a storm, familiar but slightly off. Annie noticed the card every time she passed the table. "You're going to call, right?" she asked Sunday after church. Marissa was at the sink, rinsing 2 coffee mugs. "I said I would think about it." "That means no." "That means I am thinking." "Mama." Marissa set 1 mug in the drying rack. "Annie, lawyers are not magic. Legal aid offices are busy. And if Peachtree thinks I'm trouble, they can stop giving me good assignments without ever saying why." "They already think you're trouble." Marissa turned. "Yes. But there is a kind of trouble people respect, and a kind they punish. Working people spend their lives learning the difference." Annie hated how true that sounded. She sat at the table and pulled the notebook closer. "So what do we do? Let them scare you?" "No," Marissa said. "We choose our steps so we don't trip over our own anger." Before Annie could answer, the phone rang. Marissa glanced at the screen and frowned. "Richard Hartwell," she said. Annie leaned back. "He calls a lot for a man who was told not to rescue anybody." Marissa gave her a look, then answered, "Mr. Hartwell." His voice was low through the phone, not on speaker but audible enough in the quiet kitchen. Marissa listened, her expression unreadable. "When?" she asked. A pause. No press. Another pause. No photographers. No statement about healing. No soft piano music in the background. Annie looked up sharply. Marissa continued. "And Vivian Whitmore will be there?" Richard spoke longer this time. "She needs to hear it in the same kind of room where she said it," Marissa said. "That is not negotiable." Annie stopped breathing for a second. Her mother listened again, then said, "I'll consider it. That is not yes." She hung up. Annie was already standing. "What did he want?" Marissa wiped the counter, though it was already clean. "He wants to bring everyone back to the estate." "For what?" "To show the footage. To apologize publicly. To state what happened in front of the people who heard the accusation." Annie's heart kicked hard. "That's what you said needed to happen." "I know what I said." "Then why aren't you saying yes?" Marissa turned slowly. "Because walking back into that house is not a small thing." The words stopped Annie. Marissa looked toward the window above the sink, where the apartment courtyard sat quiet under a gray Sunday sky. "You remember the room, the light, the people watching." "I remember the officer's hand. I remember the floor. I remember thinking, don't cry in front of Annie. Not here. Not like this." Annie's throat tightened. "I don't want to stand in that house again and let them use my pain to feel better about themselves," Marissa said. "Then don't let them." Marissa looked at her daughter. Annie stepped closer. "Set the rules. Make him follow them. Make them look at what they did without turning it into some rich person redemption moment." Marissa's mouth softened, but her eyes stayed tired. "You make it sound simple." "No, I make it sound necessary." That evening, Richard sat at his dining table with Lily on one side and an untouched plate of roasted chicken in front of him. Lily had eaten the carrots first because she claimed they were less emotionally demanding than peas. Richard had no idea where she got these phrases. Probably from listening too closely to adults who thought she was not listening. "Mrs. Brooks might come back here," he said. Lily looked up. "To clean?" "No. So I can apologize properly." Lily considered him over her fork. "You already said sorry." "I said it in a small room after the truth had cornered me." "That doesn't count?" "It counts," Richard said. "It just doesn't cover the whole debt." Lily pushed a pea around her plate. "Will Annie come?" "I assume so." "She's scary." Richard almost smiled. "A little. I like her. That does not surprise me. She talks like she has a sword but no sword." This time Richard did smile, briefly. "Yes, that is accurate." Lily looked toward the hallway that led to the grand hall. "Are the people coming too? The ones who stared?" "Yes." "Good," she said, then stabbed a pea with unusual force. "They need practice looking." Richard set down his fork. He had built towers, negotiated contracts worth more than some towns, sat across from governors, mayors, judges, and men who mistook money for wisdom. Yet in 2 days, An 18-year-old girl and an 8-year-old child had done more to strip him of excuses than all those rooms combined. The next morning, Marissa called Richard back. Annie stood beside her at the kitchen table, notebook open. Marissa said, "I'll come under conditions." Richard must have asked what they were, because Marissa began listing them without glancing at Annie. No press. No outside photographer. No charity language. No one uses the words incident, confusion, or misunderstanding. You will say false accusation. You will say bias. You will say my full name. Vivian Whitmore will be present. Officer Reed will be present. Mr. Keller will be present. The staff who were working that night will be invited too, and not as background. They heard it. They deserve to hear the correction. Annie wrote quickly. Marissa paused, listening. "No," she said. "I am not asking for a stage. I am asking that the room where my name was damaged be the room where it is corrected." Another pause. "Friday evening," Marissa said. "After working hours, I will not miss a paying shift for this." Annie looked at her mother then, proud enough that it hurt. Marissa ended the call and sat down. "He agreed?" Annie asked. "He agreed. You okay?" "No." Annie sat across from her. "Me neither." Marissa reached across the table and touched the notebook. "Read me the conditions." Annie read them back, each line clean and hard. When she finished, Marissa nodded. "Add one more," she said. Annie lifted the pen. "I do not have to forgive anyone in public." Annie wrote it slowly. Friday came with rain. Not a storm. Just a steady Atlanta rain that made brake lights smear red on the roads and turned the sidewalks dark. Marissa came home from work at 4, showered, and stood before her closet for a long time. Annie watched from the doorway. The closet held church dresses, 2 pairs of black slacks, a navy blouse, her winter coat, and 3 work uniforms. Annie said, "You don't have to wear it." Marissa's hand rested on the blue uniform. "Yes," she said, "I do. They judged you in it. That is why they will correct themselves while I'm wearing it." Annie did not argue. Marissa ironed the uniform with slow care. She polished her work shoes. She pinned her name tag on straight. Annie wore a simple black dress and the small silver cross her mother had given her for graduation Sunday at church. She tucked the notebook into her bag. Before they left, Marissa stood in the kitchen and looked around the apartment. The light over the stove flickered once. A pot of collard greens sat cooling on the back burner. A stack of mail waited unopened near the microwave. "This place looks small after a house like his," Annie said quietly. Marissa picked up her keys. "No, his house looks empty after a place like this." They drove in silence. At Hartwell Estate, no valets waited this time. No music, no champagne. The gates opened, and Annie felt her stomach twist as the mansion came into view. The house looked the same, but it knew more now. Or maybe Annie did. Richard stood at the side entrance when they arrived. Lily was beside him in a yellow raincoat, holding Mr. Buttons under one arm. Marissa got out of the car. Richard stepped forward, then stopped at a respectful distance. His eyes went to her name tag. "Mrs. Brooks," he said. Marissa nodded. "Mr. Hartwell." Lily looked up at Marissa. "I'm glad you came back." Marissa's face softened. "I'm trying to be." Lily nodded as if that made perfect sense. Inside, the grand hall had been rearranged. No flowers, no band, no bar. Just rows of chairs facing a large screen. The room seemed less grand without people pretending it was kind. Guests from that night sat scattered among staff members, caterers, cleaners, servers, and security personnel. Vivian Whitmore sat in the front row, stiff-backed, her earrings absent. Officer Reed stood near the side wall. "Mr. Keller held a folder with both hands. As Annie walked beside her mother, the whispers began and died quickly. Marissa did not lower her head. Richard stepped to the front of the room. He did not stand behind a podium. Annie noticed that too. No barrier. No polished wood to hide behind. He looked at Marissa first, then at the room. "Thank you for coming," he said. "We are here because last week, in this house, Mrs. Marissa Brooks was falsely accused of stealing jewelry. That accusation was made without evidence. It was accepted too quickly. It nearly resulted in her being taken away by police. That happened under my roof, and I was responsible." The room went still. Annie opened her notebook. For once, she hoped she would not have to correct the record. Not because she trusted the room, because, this time, the room was finally being made to listen. Richard let the sentence sit. He did not rush to the video. He did not reach for safer language. He stood in the front of the room with his hands at his sides, while the people who had gathered there shifted under the weight of what he had just named. Falsely accused, without evidence, accepted too quickly, responsible. Annie wrote each phrase in her notebook. Not because she thought he would take it back, but because habit had become part of her spine now. Paper remembered. So did daughters. Richard turned slightly toward the screen. Before anyone speaks, we are going to watch the footage. Vivian's posture stiffened. The lights dimmed. A technician near the wall clicked a laptop. The first image appeared. The blue room. Empty except for the vanity, the wooden box, the folded towel, and the chair Lily had later searched beneath. Annie felt Marissa's hand find hers. She squeezed back. On the screen, Vivian entered, still wearing the earrings. The room watched her remove them. The room watched her set them down. The room watched her open her purse, pull out lipstick, and knock the earrings behind the wooden box without noticing. Then Vivian left. No one spoke. The video jumped forward. Marissa entered with a trash bag and folded cloths. Annie knew this part, but seeing it in front of everyone made her chest tighten. Her mother moved through the room carefully, leaving people's belongings untouched. She cleared glasses. She replaced the liner in the trash can. She wiped a side table. She never touched the vanity. The camera kept watching. Then Lily appeared, barefoot, small, searching for Mr. Buttons. She saw the glint behind the box, leaned in, and left when Mrs. Keller called her from the hall. The screen went black. The lights came back up. For once, the grand hall did not know what to do with itself. Richard faced the room again. That is the truth of what happened. Mrs. Whitmore misplaced her earrings. Mrs. Brooks did not touch them. My staff did not verify the facts. Officer Reed was called before the room was searched. I believed suspicion because it was convenient, because it fit an old and ugly assumption about who belongs in a room and who is only there to serve it. Annie's pain stopped. That was not in the first letter. Richard looked directly at Marissa. Mrs. Brooks, I said I knew people like you struggled with rent. I used your work and your circumstances as if they were evidence against you. They were not. They were evidence that you work hard. I should have honored that. Instead, I insulted you. Marissa did not look away. Richard continued, I apologize for the false accusation. I apologize for the words I used. I apologize for allowing police action to begin before evidence was reviewed. And I apologize that your daughter had to defend you in a room full of adults who should have known better. Annie felt that line in her throat. Beside her, Marissa breathed in slowly. Richard turned to Annie. Miss Brooks, you were right. I did not just allow it. I let it. The room shifted again. A few people looked at Annie now, but she kept her eyes on Richard. She did not want admiration from them. Admiration was cheap after silence. Richard looked toward the side wall. Officer Reed. The officer stepped forward. He had removed his hat and held it in both hands. Without the easy authority of the uniform, he looked older. Mrs. Brooks, he said, I owe you an apology. I responded to the complaint, but I let the pressure of the room move me faster than the evidence. I should not have prepared to remove you before the footage was reviewed. I should have slowed the situation down. I did not. I am sorry. Marissa gave a small nod. Thank you. Officer Reed did not look relieved. That was good, Annie thought. Relief would have made the apology about him. Mr. Keller stepped forward next. His face was pale, his folder trembling slightly. Mrs. Brooks, he said, as house manager, I failed to protect the staff working under my supervision. I allowed a guest's certainty to carry more weight than your word. I also failed to intervene when one of the temporary supervisors restrained your arm without cause. He has been removed from all Hartwell-contracted events. I am sorry. Marissa looked at him. Do you know my name now, Mr. Keller? His face flushed. Yes, ma'am. Marissa Brooks. She nodded once. Then use it when you speak about me. Yes, ma'am. Vivian remained seated. Everyone knew it. Nobody had to say her name. Richard turned toward her. Mrs. Whitmore. Vivian's chin lifted. Richard, I was told this would be a correction, not a public trial. Marissa spoke before Richard could. It felt like a public trial when I was the one standing there. A few staff members lowered their eyes. One of the caterers in the back whispered, "Amen," then covered his mouth as if he had not meant to say it aloud. Vivian stood slowly. She smoothed the front of her jacket, though it did not need smoothing. "I regret the confusion," she said. Annie closed her eyes. Marisa did not move. Richard said, "That is not enough." Vivian turned toward him, shocked. "Excuse me? You accused Mrs. Brooks without evidence." Vivian's face hardened. "My jewelry was missing. She had been in the room." "So had you," Annie said. Vivian looked at her with open dislike. "Must she comment on everything?" "Yes," Marissa said quietly. "Tonight, she may." The words landed like a hand on Annie's back. Vivian's mouth tightened. For a moment, it seemed she might walk out. But the room was watching her now, and pride had trapped her, where conscience had not. She turned to Marissa. "I am sorry I accused you without proof." Marissa waited. Vivian swallowed. "I was careless with my earrings and careless with your name." That sounded rehearsed, but it was closer to true. Marissa said, "Thank you." Vivian looked relieved too soon. Marissa added, "I accept that you said it. I am not telling you I forgive it." Vivian's face went red, but she sat down. Annie wrote that down. "I accept that you said it. I am not telling you I forgive it." Richard stepped forward again. "There are also changes being made. Effective immediately. No accusation of theft or misconduct against any worker in this home or any Hartwell property may lead to police involvement until the area has been searched, available camera footage reviewed, and the worker allowed to give a statement without being physically restrained. Staff will be addressed by name. Vendors will receive copies of the policy. Any guest who refuses to follow it will not be invited back." Vivian looked up sharply at the last sentence. Richard did not look away from the room. "This policy should have existed already," he said. "That it did not is my failure." Annie felt her anger shift again. It did not leave. It became something with edges, something more useful than flame. A woman from the catering staff raised her hand, uncertainly. Richard nodded. "Will that policy apply to us too?" she asked. "Not just cleaning staff?" "Yes," Richard said. "To everyone working an event." A server in the back asked, "And if a guest says no, then the guest leaves?" That created the first real sound in the room, not applause, not quite approval, but a low breath of people hearing something they had not expected from a man like him. Marisa stood. Annie looked up at her, surprised. Her mother did not walk to the front. She spoke from where she was, in her blue uniform, with her name tag straight and visible. "I am not here because I enjoy being looked at," Marissa said. "I am here because last week, people looked at me and still did not see me. I have cleaned houses most of my life. I have walked through front doors, side doors, service doors, and back doors. I have learned that some people can trust you with their children's bedrooms, their medicine cabinets, their silver drawers, and still not trust your word when it matters." The room was silent. "I do not need to be praised for being honest," she said. "Honesty is not special where I come from. It is expected. What I need is for people in rooms like this to stop acting like honesty belongs only to people who can afford diamonds." Annie's eyes burned. Marissa looked at Richard, then at Vivian, then at the staff standing along the wall. "My name is Marissa Brooks. I am a cleaner. I am a mother. I am not a thief." Those things should not have needed a video. No one moved. Then Lily stepped out from beside her father and began to clap. One small pair of hands. The sound was thin at first, almost swallowed by the size of the hall. Then a server joined. Then a caterer. Then Mrs. Keller. Then, slowly, the rest of the room. The applause did not wash anything clean, but it carried one useful thing: public acknowledgement in the same room that had held public shame. Annie did not clap. She held her mother's hand. Marissa did not smile. She did not need to. Richard watched them, and Annie could see he understood at least that much. This was not a happy ending. It was a correction. Corrections mattered, but they did not erase the original wound. When the applause faded, Marissa turned to Annie. "We can go now." Richard stepped forward. "Mrs. Brooks, may I speak with you for a moment?" Marissa looked at him. "Not tonight." He accepted it. Of course. Annie and Marissa walked toward the exit. This time, they did not take the service corridor. Marissa turned toward the grand front doors. A few guests moved aside. Annie noticed Richard watching. So did Lily. At the doorway, Marissa paused and looked back once, not at Vivian, not at the chairs, but at the floor where she had stood the night of the accusation. Then she walked out through the front of Hartwell Estate. Her daughter beside her. Her name restored but not borrowed. Not granted. Not gifted. It had always been hers. The front steps were wet from the rain, and the stone reflected the porch lights in long pale strips. Annie walked close to her mother, but she did not reach for her hand. Not this time. Marissa had chosen the front door, and Annie understood that meant she needed to feel the ground under her own feet. Behind them, the doors opened again. Annie turned, ready to speak before anyone could ask for one more thing. It was Lily. She stood beneath the porch light in a yellow raincoat, Mr. Buttons tucked under her arm, her shoes untied. Richard came out a few steps behind her but stopped when Lily lifted one small hand, as if she had told him to stay there. "Mrs. Brooks?" Lily called. Marissa turned. "Yes, honey?" Lily walked down 2 steps, then stopped. "I forgot to say something." Richard's face tightened with concern, but he did not interrupt. Lily looked at Marissa, then at Annie. "When I saw the earrings, I thought grown-ups would find them because grown-ups know how to find things. But they didn't. They looked at you instead." Marissa's expression softened. Lily held out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote it better this time." Marissa took it gently. "Thank you." Lily looked down at her shoes. "I don't want to be the kind of grown-up who looks wrong." The sentence made the night quiet. Marissa bent slightly. Not too much. Just enough to meet Lily's eyes. "Then practice looking right now. Not when you're grown. Now." Lily nodded as if she had been given a real assignment. Richard came down 1 step. "Lily, let Mrs. Brooks get home." Marissa looked at him. "She is all right." Lily glanced back at her father, then whispered, "Daddy's trying." Annie almost said something sharp, but Marissa's elbow touched her lightly. "I know," Marissa said. "He feels bad." "He should," Annie said before she could stop herself. Lily looked at her, not hurt, just thinking. Does feeling bad help? Annie hesitated. It was harder to answer a child than a billionaire. "Not by itself," she said, "but it can make somebody start doing the right thing." Lily nodded. "Then I hope he keeps feeling a little bad." Marissa let out a quiet breath that was almost a laugh. Richard looked down, and for once, embarrassment seemed to teach him instead of defend him. Lily stepped closer and hugged Marissa around the waist. Annie froze. Marissa froze too, but only for a second. Then she placed one hand lightly on Lily's back. "Thank you for telling the truth," Lily said into the blue uniform. Marissa closed her eyes. "Thank you for seeing it." When Lily pulled away, she looked at Annie. "Are you still mad?" "Yes," Annie said. Lily nodded. "Okay." That answer was so simple Annie had no defense against it. Richard walked them to the bottom of the steps but did not come closer. "Mrs. Brooks." "Miss Brooks, your conditions tonight were honored. I know that does not settle the matter." "No," Marissa said. "It does not. I understand." Annie looked at him. "You understand tonight. What about next month?" Richard held her gaze. "That is the question." It was the first thing he had said that did not try to finish the conversation. Marissa opened Lily's note under the porch light. The handwriting was uneven but careful. "Dear Mrs. Brooks, tonight I saw your name on your shirt before anybody said it. I will remember to look at names first. I am sorry the room was late." From Lily, Marissa folded the note with care and placed it in her purse. "Good night, Mr. Hartwell," she said. "Good night, Mrs. Brooks." Annie and Marissa got into the Corolla. The seats were cold, and the windshield was spotted with rain. As they drove away, Annie looked back once. Lily stood on the steps with Richard behind her, small yellow coat beside a dark suit, both of them watching the old car pass through the gates. This time, the gates opening did not feel like permission. It felt like leaving with something they had not been given. For several minutes, neither Annie nor Marissa spoke. The wipers moved back and forth, pushing rainwater aside in steady arcs. Traffic was light. Atlanta looked blurred and tired. Its lights stretched across wet pavement. Finally, Annie said, "You were amazing." Marissa kept her eyes on the road. "I was angry." "You can be both." Marissa did not answer right away. "I almost didn't stand up." "But you did." "I stood because I saw you open that notebook." Annie turned toward her. Marissa's hands tightened on the wheel. You were ready to write down whatever happened next. I thought, if my child can bear witness, I can bear being seen. Annie looked down at her lap. I didn't know that. Neither did I until it happened. They stopped at a red light. A man crossed in front of them with a grocery bag held over his head against the rain. An ambulance passed 2 streets away, siren low and fading. Marissa said, I don't want you carrying this like a stone. It already happened. I know, but carrying the truth is not the same as carrying the wound. Annie looked at her mother. How do I know the difference? Marissa gave a small, tired smile. Ask me again when I learn. That was honest enough to sit with. When they reached home, the apartment smelled faintly of collard greens and laundry detergent. Marissa slipped off her work shoes by the door. Annie placed her bag on the kitchen chair and took out the notebook, then stopped. For the first time all week, she was not sure what to write. Marissa noticed from the sink. Nothing to say? Too much. Then write one true sentence. Annie sat down. The page waited. She held the pen for a long time, then wrote, Mama walked out the front door. She stared at it. It was not dramatic. It did not explain the accusation, the video, the apology, Vivian's face, Officer Reed's lowered eyes, Richard's policy, Lily's note, or the applause that had sounded too late. But the sentence held what mattered. Her mother had entered that house through labor and left through dignity. Marissa came behind her and read it over her shoulder. That's enough for tonight, she said. Annie closed the notebook. On Monday, life tested whether the correction would last. Peachtree Premier called at 8:05 with 3 new assignments and no mention of paperwork. Marissa accepted 2 and declined 1 because it conflicted with church choir practice. The woman on the phone sounded careful, but she did not sound cold. That was a start. At school, Kayla made Annie retell the front door exit twice, then said, Your mom is cooler than both of us combined. She always was. True, we were just slow. Annie opened her notebook during lunch and found herself surrounded by 3 students she barely knew. One was a quiet boy from her government class whose father worked hotel maintenance. Another was a girl whose aunt cleaned medical offices at night. The third, a senior named Brianna, sat down without asking and said, My grandmother got accused of stealing a necklace from a lady she cared for. They found it in the lady's own dresser 2 days later. Nobody apologized. Annie looked at her. Brianna shrugged, but her eyes were hard. Just saying. Your mom's not the only one. That sentence followed Annie through the rest of the day. By Wednesday, there were more stories. Not loud ones. Not speeches. Small things passed in hallway corners, after class, beside lockers, in text messages sent late at night. A cousin accused at a department store. A father stopped at a loading dock though he had a badge. A nurse's aide blamed for missing cash that later turned up in a patient's drawer. Working people, black people, poor people, people with uniforms, people with names others had not bothered to learn. Annie wrote them down only when people asked her to. She began a new section in the notebook, not just Mama. When Marissa saw the heading, she sat down slowly. Annie, I'm not posting them. I'm just keeping them. People trusted you with those. I know. Marissa touched the edge of the page. Then protect them. I will. Marissa studied her daughter's face. This is how things begin, you know. What things? Movements, trouble, healing. Sometimes all 3 wear the same coat. Annie looked at the notebook. I don't know what I'm doing. Good, Marissa said. People who think they know everything usually cause the most damage. That Friday, inside was an announcement. Hartwell Foundation would fund a workers' rights training program for domestic workers, cleaners, caterers, and event staff across Atlanta. The program would be designed with legal aid organizations, not by Hartwell staff alone. It would include a reporting hotline, policy templates for private events, and free workshops on employee rights, false accusations, and documentation. At the bottom was a handwritten note from Richard. Mrs. Brooks, this is not in your name unless you want it to be. It began because of what happened to you, but it should belong to the people it serves. You were right. I needed to ask what my world keeps doing. Marissa handed the note to Annie. Annie read it twice. What do you think? Marissa asked. Annie looked at the notebook, at the stories people had begun trusting her with, at Lily's note still tucked into her mother's purse. at the name tag resting on the counter beside the folded uniform. "I think," Annie said slowly, "it depends who gets to speak." Marissa nodded. "Then maybe we make sure it is not just him." That evening, Annie wrote one more sentence before bed. Justice was no longer only about proving Mama did not steal the earrings. She paused, then added, "It was about changing the room before the next woman stood in it." The first workers' rights meeting was held in the basement of New Hope Baptist Church, because Marissa refused to let Hartwell Estate become the center of it. "People will not tell the truth under chandeliers," she said. Richard did not argue. That alone told Annie he had learned something. The church basement smelled like coffee, floor wax, and the fried chicken someone had brought, even though the meeting notice said light refreshments. Folding chairs were arranged in rows, but people kept moving them into circles because nobody wanted to feel like they were being lectured. A long table near the wall held legal aid pamphlets, sign-in sheets, pens, and a cardboard box labeled stories, questions, concerns, in Annie's handwriting. By 6:30, the room was nearly full. Cleaners came in uniforms, nurses' aides in scrubs, caterers in black pants, hotel housekeepers with tired shoulders, janitors, nannies, maintenance workers, kitchen staff, and a few church ladies who said they were just here to listen, but had brought enough food to feed everybody twice. Some came because they had heard about Marissa. Some came because they had their own stories and had waited years for a room that would not shame them for telling them. Annie sat beside Kayla at the registration table, checking names and passing out note cards. Kayla leaned close. "This is bigger than your notebook." Annie looked around the room. "I know. That scares you?" "Yes." "Good. That means you're paying attention." Annie gave her a look. "You've been hanging around my mother too much. Best education I've had all year." Across the room, Marissa stood near the coffee urn in her Sunday blouse and black slacks, not her cleaning uniform. The name tag was in her purse. Annie knew because she had seen her mother slip it in before they left home. Marissa had not said why, and Annie had not asked. Richard arrived without photographers, without an entourage, and without taking the front of the room. He came with Lily, Mrs. Keller, and two attorneys from a legal aid organization Annie recognized from the card he had given them in the Peachtree parking lot. Lily carried Mr. Buttons in one arm and a stack of crayons in the other because she had insisted the children who came needed something to do. Annie watched Richard pause at the doorway. This was not his room. That mattered. He seemed to know it. Marissa walked over to him. "Mr. Hartwell, Mrs. Brooks, you understand tonight is not about you." "Yes. If people criticize your company, your house, your friends, or you, they get to finish their sentences." Richard nodded. "Agreed. If you answer plainly. Yes. And if you do not know what to say, I will say I do not know." Marissa studied him for a second. "Good. That will be new for some men in this city." Richard looked like he wanted to smile, then wisely decided not to. The meeting began with Pastor Ellis, an older man with a careful voice and a habit of letting silence do some of his speaking. "We are not here to stir bitterness," he said from the front. "We are here because truth untold becomes a burden carried by the people least able to spare the strength. Tonight, we put some of that burden down." Then he handed the microphone to Marissa. Annie held her breath. Her mother did not move to the center right away. She stood where she was, near the first row, as if she wanted people to understand she was not above them. "My name is Marissa Brooks," she said. "Most of you know why we are here. A guest lost earrings in a room I had cleaned. I was accused. The police were called. The cameras proved I did not touch anything. A public correction was made, but after that, my work was suspended, papers were pushed toward me, and people used soft words for hard harm." Heads nodded across the room. Marissa continued, "What happened to me was not rare. That is the part I cannot forget." A woman in the back said, "That's right. My daughter started writing things down," Marissa said, looking at Annie. "At first, I thought she was trying to protect me. Then I realized she was also protecting the truth from being edited." Annie looked down at the sign-in sheet because if she met her mother's eyes too long, she would cry. Marissa reached into her purse and took out the name tag. "Marissa Brooks." She held it up. "This helped some people remember I had a name only after they had harmed me. Tonight, I want every person in this room to write their name on the card you were given. Not your job first. Not who hired you. Your name first." People looked down at the blank note cards. Pens began moving. A housekeeper near the aisle wrote slowly, pressing hard enough that the pen almost tore the paper. A man in a maintenance jacket stared at his card before writing. A young nanny wrote her name, then wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Lily sat at the children's table and wrote, Lily Hartwell, in large, uneven letters, then drew a small bear beside it. Marissa said, Now, under your name, write one thing you wish people saw before they judged you. The room grew quieter. Annie watched hands pause, then begin again. Mother, veteran, grandfather, student, survivor, choir director, caregiver, neighbor, human. The last one came from a janitor named Mr. James, who was sitting alone near the coffee table. He looked embarrassed when Pastor Ellis asked if anyone wanted to read theirs aloud, but Marissa nodded to him, and he stood. My name is Arthur James, he said. I've been cleaning the downtown courthouse 14 years. Judges walk past me every night. Lawyers, too. Half of them don't know my face unless a trash can overflows. I wrote human because I'm tired, and that's the first word they keep forgetting. Nobody clapped. It was better than clapping. They listened. Then the stories came. A hotel housekeeper described being accused of taking a guest's watch that later turned up inside the guest's gym bag. A caterer said a woman once checked his pockets after a bracelet went missing and laughed when it was found in the bathroom. A home health aide talked about being removed from a client's house because a grandson claimed cash was missing, only for the cash to be found hidden in a Bible. Richard sat in the third row, taking notes. Once, Annie saw his pen stop. The woman speaking was describing how a family kept her working for them after accusing her, as if keeping the job should have made her grateful. Richard looked up then, his face tight with recognition. Annie wondered how many rooms he had been in where stories like that were never told because people like him were seated at the head of the table. When the legal aid attorney, Miss Priya Raman, stood, she did not make a speech. She gave practical steps. Ask for the accusation in writing. Do not sign forms on the spot. Request camera review. Write times and names. Take photographs of injuries. Have a witness if possible. Use full names. Keep copies. Call for help before fear makes you quiet. Annie wrote every point, even though half of them were already in her bones. During the break, Richard approached Marissa with caution. May I ask you something? He said. You may ask. Would you consider helping design the training? Paid, of course. Not as a symbol, as an advisor. Marissa studied him. Why me? Because you know where the policy will fail if it is written only by people like me. That answer was good enough to make Annie look up from the registration table. Marissa did not answer quickly. I'll consider it. Richard nodded. Thank you. That is not yes. I know. Lily appeared beside Annie with a paper cup of lemonade. Do you think your mom will say yes? I don't know. My dad hopes she will. I bet he does. Lily looked at her carefully. Are you still mad? Annie smiled a little. Yes. Less? Some days. Lily nodded. My dad says some things don't get fixed straight. They get fixed crooked, then you keep working. Annie looked toward Richard. He said that? No. I told him that. He agreed. Annie laughed for the first time in that room. Near the end of the meeting, Pastor Ellis asked Annie to speak. She almost refused. Then Marissa looked at her, not pushing, just present. Annie stood with her notebook in her hands. My name is Annie Brooks, she said. I'm Marissa Brooks's daughter. The night my mother was accused, I started writing because I was afraid powerful people would rename what happened. They did. They called it confusion, misunderstanding, an incident. But when people in this room told me their stories, I realized the words matter because the pattern matters. She looked at the crowd, then at Richard. If a room can learn to suspect the same people first, it can learn to question itself first. That is what I want this program to do. Not make rich people feel generous. Not make workers grateful for basic respect. I want it to slow down the moment before harm happens. No one moved. Annie's voice shook, but she kept going. My mother should not have needed a camera to be believed. None of you should. This time, when the room applauded, Annie understood it differently. It was not applause for pain. It was agreement. It was people saying yes. That is the thing. Hold it there. After the meeting, Marissa and Annie stayed to fold chairs. Richard tried to help. Awkwardly at first. Then better after Mr. James showed him how not to pinch his fingers. Marissa watched him stack 2 chairs crookedly and said, You own how many buildings? Several. And nobody taught you folding chairs? Apparently not. Mr. James laughed. Millionaires don't know hinges. That's the first policy change. Even Richard laughed at that. When the basement was nearly empty, Marissa took her name tag from the table and placed it in Annie's hand. Annie looked at it. Why are you giving me this? Because you kept my name safe when other people handled it carelessly. Annie closed her fingers around the tag. It was never mine to keep. No, Marissa said. But you reminded them it was mine. On the ride home, Annie held the name tag in her lap. She thought about the box of note cards now in the back seat, full of names and truths and handwriting that leaned, shook, pressed, and curved across paper. At home, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Tonight, the room changed, because the workers spoke first." Then she added, "A name is not proof of innocence. It is proof that a person was there before anyone accused them." The first morning after the church meeting, Annie woke to the sound of her mother singing in the kitchen. It was not loud. Marissa never sang loud before coffee. It was a low gospel line, half hummed, half remembered, moving with the clink of a spoon against a mug and the soft scrape of a pan on the stove. Annie lay still for a moment and listened. After everything that had happened, the sound felt like evidence of its own. Not that the wound had vanished, only that her mother had not. When Annie came into the kitchen, Marissa was making eggs and toast in her work pants and an old Howard University sweatshirt she had bought from a thrift store years ago because, as she used to say, even if I didn't go, somebody in this house ought to dress like ambition. Annie sat at the table and placed the name tag beside her notebook. Marissa noticed. "You slept with that thing?" "No." Marissa raised an eyebrow. "It was on my nightstand." "That is still strange." Annie smiled. "Maybe." Marissa slid a plate in front of her. "Eat before you start documenting breakfast." Annie picked up a fork. "Too late. I already remember everything." The phone rang before Marissa could answer. She looked at the screen and gave a small breath. "Miss Rahman." Annie straightened. Marissa answered. "Good morning." She listened while flipping off the stove. Her expression changed slowly, not into shock, not exactly into joy, but into something guarded that wanted to become both. "Yes," she said. "I can come Tuesday evening." "No, not alone. My daughter will come if she wants to." Annie mouthed. "What?" Marissa held up one finger. "I understand," Marissa said. "Thank you. And Miss Raymond? Please make sure Mr. James is invited too." He said the word human, and I don't want anyone forgetting it. She hung up. Annie leaned forward. "What happened?" "The legal aid group wants to build the first training session from the stories shared last night. They asked if I would be part of the advisory group. And I said I can come Tuesday." Annie grinned. "That sounds like yes. That sounds like Tuesday." "Mama." Marissa sat across from her. "Yes, I'm going to help." Annie's smile softened. "You really are?" Marissa looked at the name tag on the table. "I spent a long time thinking survival meant keeping my head down and doing good work until people had no reason to doubt me. Then I did good work, and they doubted me anyway." Annie said nothing. "So maybe I was asking the wrong question," Marissa continued. "Maybe it isn't. How do I become the kind of woman they won't accuse? Maybe it is. Why is accusation so easy for them in the first place?" Annie reached for her notebook, then stopped. Marissa saw it. "Go ahead." Annie wrote the sentence. When she finished, Marissa touched the page lightly. "Your grandmother would have loved you," she said. Annie looked up. "You've said that before. I mean it more every time." By spring, the program had a name, not Hartwell's idea, though he had offered several that sounded like they belonged on a brochure no one would read. The name came from one of the church ladies, Mrs. Evelyn Price, who had worked as a school cafeteria manager for 31 years and said people did not need fancy words when simple ones had gone ignored. They called it Name First. The first workshop was held at New Hope, then at a union hall near downtown, then in a community college classroom with flickering lights and a vending machine that stole $2 from Kayla. Workers came after shifts, before night jobs, on lunch breaks, with children, with cousins, with questions written on the backs of receipts. Miss Raymond explained rights. Mr. James explained how to document without losing your temper. Marissa explained how to stand still when someone tried to make shame move into your body. Annie helped collect stories and turn them into checklists people could carry in their wallets. Richard came sometimes, but he did not sit in front. He paid for rooms, printing, childcare, and meals, and learned to let his name stay small. Lily came when school allowed, sitting at the children's table with crayons, writing names on paper stars and taping them to the wall. Once, Annie found her helping a 5-year-old write Miguel in blue crayon. Names first, Lily said seriously. Miguel nodded as if this were law. Vivian Whitmore did not come. She sent one donation through a private account, no note attached. Marissa returned it. Annie asked why. Marissa sealed the envelope and said, "Money without truth still has fingerprints." That went into the notebook. By May, the notebook was full. The last pages were thick from taped-in cards, folded statements, quotes from workers, Lily's notes, copies of policies, and one small photo Kayla had taken of Marissa speaking at the Union Hall, with her hands resting on the podium and her name tag pinned to her blouse. Annie did not realize the final page was coming until she turned and found it waiting. Blank. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time, pen in hand. Marissa was ironing in the living room, the television low. "You stuck?" "A little." "Good. Means you're not rushing." Annie looked at the stack of full pages. "I thought when this was done, I'd feel finished." Marissa laughed softly. "Baby, justice is not a book report." "I know." "No, you don't. Not yet." "That's all right." Annie leaned back. "Do you feel better?" Marissa turned off the iron and stood over the board for a moment. "Some days." "And other days?" "Other days I still hear the word rent in his voice." Annie's face changed. Marissa came to the table and sat down. "But I also hear your voice after it. I hear Lily on the stairs. I hear people in that church basement saying their names out loud. Harm echoes, Annie. So does courage." Annie looked at the final blank page. "What should I write?" Marissa shook her head. "That one is yours." Annie sat with that. Outside, kids rode bikes through the apartment courtyard, their tires clicking over cracks in the concrete. A neighbor called someone in for dinner. Somewhere below, a car radio played an old song Marissa liked. The apartment was still small. The bills still came. The Corolla still needed work. Marissa still cleaned offices and homes and carried her own supplies. Nothing had turned into a fairy tale, but something had changed. Rooms had changed. Policies had changed. People had learned to ask before accusing. Workers had learned to write things down before fear swallowed details. A billionaire had learned that saying sorry was not the same as stepping aside. A child had learned to look at names first. And a daughter had learned that truth could begin as a cry in a mansion and become a table where others placed their own. Annie wrote slowly. "My mother walked into that house as Marissa Brooks." She paused. Then she wrote the last line. "The world was the one that had to learn her name." Marissa read it over her shoulder and stayed quiet. Annie closed the notebook. For a while, neither of them moved. Then Marissa reached across the table and placed her name tag on top of the cover. Marissa Brooks. Not proof. Not defense. A name. Outside, evening settled over the city. The apartment lights came on one by one. In kitchens, buses, offices, churches, and quiet back rooms, people carried names that were too often overlooked until something went missing. Annie knew now that justice did not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrived as a record kept, a correction spoken, a policy changed, a room rearranged, a mother standing at the front door instead of the back. Marissa rose to finish ironing. Annie picked up the empty second notebook from the shelf. Her mother looked at it and sighed. "Already?" Annie smiled. "There are more rooms." Marissa studied her daughter, then nodded once. "Yes," she said, "there are." And this time, when Annie opened to the first blank page, she did not begin with what had been taken. She began with a name. The lesson of this story is that a person's worth should never be judged by their job, their income, their race, or the uniform they wear. Marissa Brooks was honest long before powerful people finally admitted it, and her daughter Annie reminded everyone that silence can protect injustice. The story teaches us that truth must be spoken clearly, especially when the world tries to soften harm with words like misunderstanding or confusion. Real justice is not only proving someone innocent after they have been humiliated, it is changing the room so the next person is seen, respected, and believed before they are accused. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.